The cultural violence, the cultural impunity, the cultural oppressions, it keeps repeating itself even today. I think it's a high time for all of us to realize that democracy couldn't be brought by one person, couldn't be accomplished by just one hero.
On February 1st, Asia woke up to the news of a military coup that was happening in Myanmar. Nobel laureate and State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, along with several of her colleagues from the National League of Democracy, were detained in the early hours of the morning. For a country that had recently re-elected Suu Kyi's party with a landslide majority, a military takeover seemed like an unexpected turn of events. The country had been under brutal military regimes for almost 50 years, and had a much heralded transition to a democracy only a decade ago. But despite promises of a new dawn in Myanmar, human rights violations continued to plague the nation. One of the leading voices to call out the military excess of the state and to highlight the persecution of Rohingya Muslims has been activist Thinzar Shunlei Yi. 28-year-old Shunlei has been fighting for equal rights and opportunities for the different identities within Myanmar for almost a decade. Just a week before the coup, Shunlei got on a call with us to talk about why Myanmar's democracy was always fragile.
And being Burmese, actually, could you tell us a bit more about the internal conflicts that are happening in Myanmar between the Burmese majority versus other minorities in the country, especially the Rohingya?
Right after independence in 1948, we started having different internet conflict called civil war. So the civil war is stayed there since that time. Last week, we had a recent conflict between the current ethnic army and then the military. So many people being displaced, like 4,000 people being displaced, and 3 people got killed on the spot. So this kind of situation is not that strange for all of us. It happened in Arakan state, in the western part, in the northern part, in the eastern part, in State. So mostly how we see is the military fighting against almost all of the ethnic people because the ethnic people, they form their own ethnic armies. And we have nearly 21 biggest ethnic arms group in the country. So they've been fighting for many decades now. So not just in the ethnic group, but also there are conflict between the Muslim people called Rohingya in the western part of the country. So as we all know that the Rohingya conflict is there since years ago, not just in 2017, but 2017 is a spike year that we got to see many people, they were forced to flee the country. As a young generation, we feel so horrified to witness for our eyes. This Rohingya conflict is not just happened just overnight. It will started since years ago, and I think the main thing is because narrative driven by the main military and also the governments. They were releasing different fake news about the Rohingya people, not just this year, but also back in years ago. It became a government propaganda against the Rohingya people.
Would you still say that Myanmar still has a very long way to go?
The cultural violence, the cultural impunity, the cultural oppressions, it keeps repeating itself even today. When you become oppressed by the oppressor, when you are in power, you become the oppressor again, and you don't break the cycle. You keep repeating the cycle, and they don't know that they are doing this. When you are in power, you become majority, and you tend to oppress these other minorities. So we are so sick of it. We're so tired of seeing all these things. It's a time for us to wake up and to see this is happening, and with that awareness, we have to break the cycle.
You shared with me that you decided not to vote in the election. Was this situation, did it influence your decision to abstain from voting?
So we had a nationwide election in 2020. It was the third time that we had an election in Myanmar. And I decided not to vote in 2020 election last year because there are many different reasons why I was so sad, and I feel so guilty of having a right to vote because I can vote, but at the same time there is a huge disenfranchisement in the ethnic ethnic areas in Rakhine, in Shan State, also in Rohingya. The ethnic people, Rakhine people, they couldn't vote. They couldn't run the election. They don't even have election in their areas. And the Union Election Commission just say because of the situation is not safe. That's why they just cancel the areas. And I feel like this is not a right answer. They don't have any a clear justification why they cancel this area, and they just make the decision bluntly without consultation with civil society or people in those areas. So I feel like it is not right. Constitution is designed to give the privileges to the biggest power. So, but our country is not designed that way. Our country is designed to separate our power. Our country is designed to share the power to the minority ethnic people and to form a federal democratic country. But we're not going this way. So this constitution is not shaping us into where we are supposed to.
Even though parliamentary democracy was established in 2011, Myanmar's military continued to hold control within the parliament through a constitution they drafted in 2008, while the country was still under military rule. Under the constitution, 25% of seats were reserved for the army, who also retained control on 3 key ministries: defense, home affairs, and border affairs. Despite Suu Kyi and her party coming into power with election majorities in 2015 and 2020, the constitution drafted by the military gives them the majority to veto any major constitutional amendments, making it difficult to keep Myanmar truly democratic. Laws within the constitution also give the army the power to declare a state of emergency and take over, like it did this time by claiming voter fraud in last year's elections.
ပါတီစုံဒီမိုကရေစီထွေထွေရွေးကောက်ပွဲတွင်အခြေခံအသုံးပြုခဲ့သောမဲစာရင်းများမှာကြီးမားစွာကွာခြားမှုများရှိနေသဖြင့်ဖြည့်ရှင်းဆောင်ရွက်ပေးရန်ပြည်ထောင်စုရွေးကောက်ပွဲကော်မရှင်ကပြဋ္ဌာန်းခဲ့ပါသည်
In essence, the coup has stopped Aung San Suu Kyi and her party from forming the second government.
So for Aung San Suu Kyi, who went from being a Nobel Peace Prize laureate to someone at the center of a genocide, how has this crisis and Aung San Suu Kyi's fall been discussed outside of Myanmar, and as someone who's inside of Myanmar, how is it different? Like, maybe you can explain.
There are many different articles that we've been reading and different news reporting that she fell from grace, but inside the country is a different story. She remained the national heroes, and she being voted like the landslide even in previous election in 2020. So you can see how she is still very popular within the Myanmar communities, and she become she's the key. People see the state councillor because she sacrificed her life. She denied to go back to her place in UK. She remained inside the country. But now I think it's a high time for all of us to realize that democracy couldn't be brought by one person, couldn't be accomplished by just one hero. Now is the high time for us, as especially international community and our young generation, how it is so wrong to highlight only 1% or 2%. Personalizing the politics is so scary now, because anything can happen if that person just go around, and we don't have any other option. Now is the real time for us to build a democratic foundation, a collective leadership for a brighter future.
Do you feel that the younger generation is not being properly represented in what's going on with politics and maybe the elections as well?
The young people belong the biggest population in the country. We are 60% who are under 35. And the young people, we can say Myanmar is basically a young country because the median age is 27. But what we are seeing in the government, in the cabinet, the median age is 65. So you can see the age gap. There is a difference. So when we have that older people deciding our future, that does not mean that they will think of our struggle. They will never know how our our challenges are, how it is being like a young people in 2020, in 21st century. So that's what we concern the most. So we are also worried about their decision, because their decision will shape our life in next 20 years. So we are now voicing out, and we are creating our own platform to voice out how important it is to consider our voices. So we channel our voices through mainstream media, etc.
Shunlei, I know that you've traveled quite a bit before the pandemic hit, and you've worked with lots of young people across the world. So I just want to get your opinion. I'm sure you know what's been happening in Thailand when lots of young Thais are mobilizing together and fighting for change in their country, for democracy. Why do you think there is such a rise in these kind of movements, especially across Asia? And do you hope to see the same kind of change happen to Myanmar?
Yeah, it was so inspiring seeing different protests led by young people, young students in Thailand, in Hong Kong, in India, So, of course, obviously, it impacted towards our young community in the country. What we're going to do, how we're going to do. The first thing we were doing was to stand in solidarity with them. So we issued statements to be in solidarity with the Hong Kong students, Hong Kong people. Also with the Thai students, Thai protest. We believe in democracy. In democracy, we don't have the monarchy, or we don't have that authoritarian. So I think the changes there, our country, in our own situation, we're not sure if we protest in that scale, we will be shot dead by the real gun. There are different examples in 1988, 2007. Even recently in Arakan state, a protester, young Arakan, they were shot dead. There are many different, underground movements led by student leaders, especially, highlighting the civil war happening in almost all of ethnic areas. Many people fleeing out of their homes. They become homeless, futureless, jobless. So young people are being highlighted, but their works were not highlighted. I think it's a high time for the international community to also see our struggle as a young community. We are struggling so hard to fight against all these narratives, against the ethnic people, against the Rohingya people, against the democratic, pro-democracy activists. Our young people are not silenced. They're not silent. They were never silent as well.